Billionaire lent his credit card to a poor girl to buy whatever she wanted, but what she asked for made him cry. Calvin Rhodes left the meeting with the feeling that he had just wasted 3 hours of his life. Numbers, charts, projections, all correct, all in place. And yet, that emptiness in his chest wouldn't go away. 30 years old, a successful businessman, owner of a construction company that was growing faster than he could keep up with, an apartment in the best neighborhood in the city, a luxury import car, a watch that cost more than most people earned in a year, and none of it mattered in that moment. He walked aimlessly through the streets, his hands in the pockets of his grey suit, his tie loosened. The afternoon sun beat down hot on the pavement, but Calvin didn't even notice. He was lost in his own thoughts. In that automatic routine his life had become: work, make money, expand, repeat, always repeat. But for what? The question had been echoing in his head for weeks, months perhaps. He had everything he had ever wanted, or thought he wanted. Now he didn't know anymore. That's when he saw the girl. She was sitting on the sidewalk, leaning against the wall of a closed shop. She couldn't have been more than 7 years old. Light blonde hair fell disheveled over her thin shoulders. Blue eyes, too big for her small face, were fixed on the ground. In her lap, she held a worn-out teddy bear, with a ripped ear and stuffing peeking out. There was something in those eyes, a sadness that didn't match her age. Calvin stopped. He wasn't sure why. Maybe because the street was busy, and no one seemed to notice the girl there. Or maybe because something in those clear eyes reminded him of a loneliness he knew well. People hurried past. No one looked down. No one saw, but he saw. He approached slowly, crouching in front of her. "Hey, are you okay?" The girl looked up, not scared, just sad, so sad. "I'm fine." But she wasn't. Calvin could see that. "You seem upset," he said, gently. She hugged the teddy bear tighter against her chest, her small fingers sinking into the worn fabric. She didn't answer. Calvin stayed there, crouched. He thought about his own frustrations of the day, about the money he had, about the things he could do that never made any difference at all. Then he took his wallet from his pocket, opened it, and pulled out his credit card. Black, no limit. He held it out to her. "Here." The girl looked at the card, confused. "What? You can buy whatever you want." She took the card slowly, as if she didn't understand. She turned it over and over. "Anything." "Anything," Calvin confirmed. "A toy, clothes, candy, whatever you want." The girl looked at him, then at the card, then back at him. And when she spoke, and her voice was quiet but firm, "I want to buy medicine." Calvin blinked. "Medicine? Yeah. For my grandma." "Your grandma?" The girl nodded, hugging the teddy bear even tighter. "She's sick." Calvin felt something tighten in his chest. It wasn't the answer he expected. None of this was what he expected. "Sick? How?" "She coughs a lot," said the girl, and now the words came out faster, as if she had been holding them in for a long time. "Yesterday she couldn't even get out of bed. I made her tea, but it didn't help. She said she'd get better on her own, but I know she's getting worse. I just wanted to buy medicine." Calvin was silent as tears began to stream down his face. The bustle of the street continued around them, but it seemed distant. All he saw were those worried blue eyes. Too worried. No child should have that expression. "Where are your parents?" he asked gently. "I don't have a dad. And my mom." Her voice broke. "She died when I was born." The tightness in Calvin's chest grew stronger. "So you live alone with your grandmother?" The girl nodded. "Just the two of us." Calvin looked at the card in her hand. He thought about his own day, the useless meetings, the money that came and went without him even noticing, the things he bought without thinking. And here was a child holding a no-limit card asking for medicine. "Okay," he said, his voice softer. "Jan, come on. I'll take you to the pharmacy." The girl stood up, holding the teddy bear by its paw. She was too small, too thin. Her light blue dress was clean but old, with a poorly made patch on the hem. Her white sneakers were worn, but tied with care. "What's your name?" Calvin asked as they walked. Callie, that's pretty. I'm Calvin. She looked at him from the side, curious now. Are you rich? He laughed unintentionally. Why do you think that? Your clothes are nice, and you have a shiny watch, and you gave me a card that can buy anything. Calvin looked at his own wrist, the Swiss watch he had bought without a second thought. Yeah, I have money. Then why are you walking alone on the street? Don't rich people stay home? The question caught him off guard. He didn't have an answer, or he did, but he didn't know how to explain to a 7-year-old that you could have everything and still feel empty. Sometimes you just need to walk, he said, finally. Callie nodded as if she understood perfectly. Maybe she understood more than he imagined. I like walking too, she said. When my grandma's sleeping, I walk around the yard. I think about what? Stuff, she shrugged. What it would be like to have a mum, or if my grandma will get better. Calvin felt a lump in his throat. He didn't say anything, just kept walking beside her. They reached the pharmacy 2 blocks later. The place was small, half empty. A clerk in a white coat was scrolling on her phone behind the counter. She looked up when they entered, gave them a quick glance, and went back to her phone. Can I help you? She said without looking up. Calvin looked at Callie. Do you know the name of the medicine? She shook her head. My grandma just said it was for a cough. And a fever. She's had a fever for 2 days. The clerk sighed, bored. You need a prescription for some of them, and I can't sell to a child without a responsible adult. I'm here, said Calvin, directly. Sell her what she needs. The woman finally looked up properly. She looked him up and down, noticing the well-tailored suit, the watch, the air of someone used to being obeyed. Her tone changed instantly. Of course. I'll get the syrup and some pills for the fever, an antibiotic too, just in case. That should do it. She disappeared between the shelves and returned with 3 boxes and a small bottle. She scanned the items, much more attentive now. That will be $78. Calvin swiped his card before she even finished speaking. The transaction was quick. The clerk put everything in a small bag and handed it to Callie with a forced smile. Here you go, sweetie. Hope your grandma feels better. Callie held the bag with both hands, as if it were a treasure. She looked inside, checking if everything was there. Then she looked at Calvin, and for the first time, a small smile appeared on her face. Thank you. You're welcome. They left the pharmacy. The sun was lower now, the afternoon slowly fading. Calvin expected her to leave, to go on her way, but Callie just stood there, looking at him. Can you take me home? She asked, hesitantly. It's just that I don't know if I can give her the right medicine. There's a lot of writing on the box. Calvin looked at the girl, at the way she held the bag, at the fear in her eyes. Of course, come on. They walked in silence for a few streets. The neighborhood slowly changed. The shops gave way to small houses, many with peeling paint and bars on the windows. Calvin noticed that the sidewalks were cracked, that there was trash piled up in some corners. The contrast with the neighborhood where he lived was stark. Do you live far from here? Callie asked suddenly. Very far. On the other side of the city? Yeah. Is it nice there? Calvin thought of the modern building, the marble lobby, the view from his window. It's different. Different how? There are more things, but I don't know if it's nicer. Callie seemed satisfied with the answer. She kept walking, kicking a small stone in front of her. My grandma says that beauty isn't about having more. It's about having enough with love. Calvin looked at her, a 7-year-old child speaking like a philosopher. Your grandmother sounds wise. Yeah, she is. Callie smiled. She used to be a teacher, taught kids how to read. She was. Now she makes cakes. Or she used to. Her voice got quieter. Before she got sick, they turned another corner. Callie stopped in front of a house at the end of the street. It was small, a single story, with white walls stained by dampness. The iron gate was rusty, but open. A flower bed in the front showed signs of care, despite everything. Red roses, a bit wilted but still alive. This is it, she said. Calvin looked at the house. Small, yes, but there was something there. Care love in the details. Can I come in? I want to make sure your grandma takes the right medicine. Callie bit her lip, thinking. Then she nodded. Okay, but she doesn't really like strangers. They went inside. The gate creaked. The house was even smaller on the inside. The living room was tiny but organized. An old floral fabric sofa, a coffee table with a time-yellowed crochet doily, a bookshelf with a few books and some framed photos. It smelled of chamomile tea and something sweet, as if someone had recently baked a cake. There was care here. Even with so little, there was love. "Grandma?" Callie called out softly. A faint voice came from the hallway. "Callie? You're back. I'm back. And I brought the medicine." There was a silence. Then, shuffling steps. Slow. A woman appeared in the hallway doorway. She must have been in her early 60s, with grey hair tied in a loose bun, too thin. Her skin was pale, with deep dark circles under her eyes. She held onto the wall for support, her breathing heavy and wheezy. And when she saw Calvin standing there in the middle of her living room, her eyes widened. "Who is this man?" Her voice came out tense, protective. "He helped me," Callie said, running to her. "He bought the medicine, Grandma." "Look." She held up the bag. The woman looked at Calvin with suspicion, then at her granddaughter, then back at him. Her whole body seemed tense, ready to protect Callie. "I didn't ask for anyone's help," she said, firm despite her weakness. "I know," said Calvin, raising his hands in a peaceful gesture. "I saw your granddaughter on the street. She was sad. I offered to help. She just wanted medicine for you." Frances, he assumed that was her name, narrowed her eyes, analyzing him. Then she let out a tired sigh and sat on the sofa, as if her legs couldn't hold her anymore. Her hand trembled as she brought it to her forehead. "I'm sorry," she said more quietly. I don't usually trust strangers, but thank you. Really." "You're very sick," said Calvin, sitting on the edge of the armchair across from her. "It's just a bad flu." "It doesn't look like just a flu," Frances coughed, as if to prove his point. The sound was horrible, heavy, stuck in her chest, painful. She brought her hand to her mouth, her whole body bending with the effort. Callie ran to her, holding her grandmother's arm gently. When the coughing passed, Frances had tears in her eyes. From pain or exhaustion, Calvin didn't know. "I'll get better," she said, but her voice wasn't convincing anyone. "You need to go to the hospital." I can't afford it." Calvin leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "I'll pay." Frances gave a short, joyless laugh. "Bitter. You don't know me. Why would you do that?" "Because I can," said Calvin simply, "and because that little girl shouldn't have to worry if her grandmother is going to wake up the next day." Silence fell heavily between them. Callie stood beside her grandmother, holding her hand tightly. Frances looked at her granddaughter, saw the fear in her blue eyes, saw the way she looked at the stranger in the suit, without fear, with hope. "We don't need charity," said Frances Gier, but her voice was weak. "It's not charity," Calvin paused, choosing his words. "It's doing the right thing, and I haven't been doing the right thing for a long time." Frances held Callie's hand tighter. Something in her gaze faltered. Calvin saw it. He saw the fear. He saw the pride fighting against necessity. He saw a woman who had given everything for her granddaughter, and now had nothing left to give. "Please," he said, more quietly. "Let me help. Just this once." Frances closed her eyes. A tear rolled down, and she didn't wipe it away. "Okay," she whispered. Callie squeezed her grandmother's hand, and the relief on her face broke Calvin's heart. He stood up, already taking out his phone. "I'll call a car. We're going now." Frances nodded weakly. Callie helped her up, and Calvin saw how careful the girl was, how she held her grandmother as if she might break, as if she had done it many times before. While they waited for the car, Calvin looked around that small living room, the photos on the bookshelf. One of them caught his attention, a young blonde woman with light-colored eyes smiling. There was something familiar about that face, but he couldn't place what it was. The handmade crochet, the care in every detail, even with so little. That house had more life than his apartment, with all its designer furniture and city view. And he felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Purpose. The car arrived in 10 minutes. They left together. Frances could barely walk, leaning on Callie on one side and on Calvin on the other. Her weight was almost nothing, skin and bones. When they got in the car, Callie held the teddy bear in her lap and her grandmother's hand with her other hand. "Is my grandma going to be okay?" she asked quietly, looking at Calvin. He looked at her blue eyes full of fear. Fear of losing the only person she had in the world. "She will be," he said. And he realized he needed it to be true. More than any deal he had ever closed. More than any profit. More than anything in his life up to that moment. Frances closed her eyes in the back seat, her breathing irregular. Callie held her hand tightly, as if she could keep her there with just that touch. The car drove down the street, leaving the little white house behind. The sun was setting, painting everything in orange and pink. Calvin looked out the window, then at the girl beside him, then at the sick woman in the back seat, and he knew his life had changed. In that moment, in that instant when he stopped to look at a sad little girl on the sidewalk. Sometimes we walk without direction, and sometimes that's exactly where we find our way. The hospital was crowded when they arrived. People in the hallways, children crying, cell phones ringing. Calvin held Callie's hand as he followed the nurse who had gotten a wheelchair for Frances. She could barely sit up. Her whole body was hunched forward, her breathing wheezy, heavy. Callie didn't let go of her grandmother's hand, walking beside the chair. They took Frances straight to the emergency room. A small room with curtains separating the beds. The nurse helped her lie down, placed a thin blanket over her. "The doctor will be here shortly," he said, and left. Calvin and Callie stayed there, standing, not knowing what to do. Frances had her eyes closed, her hand on her forehead. Sweat was trickling down her face. "Grandma?" Callie called out, softly. "I'm here, my love. Does it hurt?" "A little." Callie squeezed her grandmother's hand. Calvin stood near the wall, watching, feeling useless. 15 minutes later, a doctor came in. Young, tired, his white coat wrinkled. He looked at the chart in his hand, then at Frances. "Mrs. Frances?" She opened her eyes with effort. "Yes. I'm going to ask a few questions. How long have you had a fever?" 3 days. "And the cough?" "A week, more or less." The doctor nodded, taking notes. He took out his stethoscope and placed it on her back. "Take a deep breath for me," Frances tried. In the middle of the breath, she started to cough, hard, her whole body trembling with the effort. Callie took a step back, scared. Calvin put a hand on her shoulder. When the coughing fit passed, Frances had tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice hoarse. "No need to apologize," said the doctor, putting away the stethoscope. "I'm going to order a chest x-ray and some blood tests, but from the sound of it, it seems like pneumonia." "Is it serious?" Calvin asked. The doctor looked at him. "And you are a friend? I brought her." The doctor nodded, then looked at Frances again. "It can be serious if we don't treat it quickly, but we're going to take care of you, okay?" Frances nodded, exhausted. They took her for the tests. Calvin and Callie waited in a room with hard plastic chairs and the smell of alcohol. Callie sat on his lap, quiet, hugging her teddy bear. "Is she going to be okay?" she asked. "She will be," Calvin said. An hour later, Frances was back. She looked worse, paler, weaker. The nurse put her on a gurney and took her somewhere else. "We're admitting her," said the doctor, appearing again. The X-ray confirmed it, pneumonia in both lungs. A serious infection. She'll need intravenous antibiotics, oxygen, rest. She'll be here for at least a week. "A week?" Callie's eyes widened. "At least," said the doctor gently. "But she'll get better. We'll take good care of her." They took Frances to a room on the second floor, smaller with 2 beds, but she was the only one in it. She already had an IV in her arm, an oxygen mask on her face. Her eyes were closed. Callie ran to the bed. "Grandma?" Frances opened her eyes slowly. She saw her granddaughter and tried to smile from behind the mask. "Hi, my love. Are you going to stay here?" "I am," Just for a few days. I want to stay with you. You can't, sweetie, but you can come visit me, okay? Callie nodded, her eyes shining. Frances looked at Calvin. Thank you, she said, her voice muffled. For everything. You don't need to thank me. She's going to need someone while I'm here. Calvin didn't hesitate. She'll stay with me. Frances looked at him, surprised. Are you sure? I am. But you barely know me. It doesn't matter, said Calvin. I'll take care of her, I promise. Frances closed her eyes. A tear rolled down. Thank you. The next day, Calvin woke up early. Earlier than he had woken up in years. He had a meeting scheduled for 9 in the morning. Important. With investors from out of the country. But now he had a child sleeping in the guest room of his apartment. A child who needed to go to school. He picked up the phone. Reschedule the meeting, he told his assistant, and cancel everything I have this afternoon. From now on, I leave at 4:30. Sir? 4:30, every day. He hung up. Callie woke up quietly. She ate breakfast in silence. Calvin drove her to her house to get clothes and school supplies. The little house seemed empty without Frances. Then they went to school. Callie stopped at the car door. Are you coming to get me? I am. Promise? Calvin felt a tightness in his chest. I promise. She smiled and ran to the gate. The routine changed. Calvin Rhodes, who always worked 12 and 14 hours a day, started leaving the office at 4:30 on the dot. Every day at 5 in the afternoon, he was in front of the school. Callie would come running out and her backpack bouncing on her back and get in the car with a smile. How was your day? It was good. They would go back to the apartment. Calvin tried to cook. He discovered he wasn't good at it. Sometimes he burned the rice. Other times the meat was tough. But Callie never complained. She ate everything, always said thank you. After dinner, there was homework. What's 7 times 8? Callie asked, looking at her notebook. Calvin thought, 56. Are you sure? I'm sure. She wrote it down carefully, her tongue sticking out as she concentrated. Calvin watched and felt something good. Done. Now it's English. The exercise asked for 5 sentences about family. Callie paused, her pen suspended. Is it hard? He asked. It's just that I don't know what to write. It's about family, and I only have my grandma. Calvin sat next to her. Then write about her, about the 2 of you. Callie thought. Then she started writing. My family is small. It's just me and my grandma. She is nice and makes yummy cake. She reads me stories before I go to sleep. I love her very much. Calvin read over her shoulder. He felt a lump in his throat. It's perfect. Callie smiled. The days passed. Calvin discovered that Callie woke up early, that she liked to draw, that she was quiet, but when she felt comfortable, she talked a lot. He discovered she was afraid of the dark. On the 3rd night, she appeared at his bedroom door, holding her teddy bear. Can I sleep in here? He let her. She slept on the edge of the bed, as if she didn't want to bother him. On Friday, Calvin left work earlier. He picked Callie up from school and stopped in front of an ice cream parlor. Do you like ice cream? Callie's eyes lit up. I do. What flavor? Vanilla. Calvin paused. Vanilla? Really? It's the best flavor. With caramel sauce. Calvin felt a smile spread across his face. I like vanilla with caramel sauce too. Callie's eyes widened. Really? Really? Everyone thinks it's weird, but it's the best. It is. People always choose chocolate but vanilla is tastier. They ordered 2 of the same ice creams, large, with lots of sauce. They sat on a bench outside. It was simple, ordinary, but Calvin couldn't remember the last time he had felt so light. Calvin? Callie licked her spoon. Then she looked at him. You're nice. He paused, his spoon in mid-air. Callie continued eating her ice cream, but there was a small smile on her face. Sincere. Calvin felt something warm in his chest. You're nice too, Callie. She looked up, and her smile grew. They finished their ice cream talking about favorite colors, about animals, about dreams. I want to be a teacher, said Callie, like my grandma was. Your grandma was a teacher. She was. She taught kids how to read, but she stopped when my mum died. To take care of me. Calvin fell silent. You're going to be a great teacher. You think so? I do. They went back to the apartment. They did homework together. Calvin helped with math. Callie read the sentences out loud. When she finished, she closed her notebook and stretched her arms. Are we visiting my grandma tomorrow? We are. She's going to be so happy. She will be. Callie nodded, satisfied. She got up and, without warning, hugged Calvin. Quick. Tight. Good night. Then she ran off to her room. Calvin stood there, frozen, his hand still in the air, and he smiled, because for the first time in a long time, he was exactly where he needed to be. The first week went by fast, faster than Calvin expected. He and Callie established a routine: wake up, breakfast, school, work for him, classes for her. At 5 in the afternoon, he was always at the gate, dinner, homework, stories before bed, and little by little, Callie started to open up. At first, she was quiet, polite but distant. She answered when he asked questions, but didn't say much on her own. Calvin respected that. He understood. She was in a stranger's house, away from her grandmother, trying to make sense of what was happening. But in the second week, something changed. It was on a Tuesday. Callie was drawing at the living room table while Calvin worked on his laptop. He had brought work home, trying to make up for the hours he no longer spent at the office. Calvin? She called, without looking up from her paper. Can I tell you a secret? He stopped typing. He looked at her. You can. Callie kept drawing, the pink-colored pencil in her hand. I'm scared my grandma won't come back. Calvin felt his chest tighten. She will come back. I know you say that, but what if it's not true? He closed his laptop. He got up and went to the table, sat in the chair next to her. Callie, look at me. She looked up. Her eyes blue, large, full of fear. Your grandma is coming back, he said, firmly. The doctors are taking care of her. She's getting better. I call them every day. And we visit her on the weekends. You saw her. She's better. But she looks so tired. She's recovering. It takes time, but she will come back home. I promise. Callie looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. Okay, I trust you. Those words caught Calvin by surprise. I trust you. When was the last time someone had said that to him? When was the last time he had deserved that trust in thank you? He said, softly. Callie went back to her drawing, but now there was a small smile on her face. After that day, she started to talk more. She told him about school, about the teacher who was nice but spoke too loudly, about the boy who pulled the girl's hair at recess, about her best friend, Sophie, who had curly hair and laughed at everything. Sophie said, I seem different. Callie commented on a Thursday, while they were eating spaghetti with a sauce that Calvin had tried to make, and that hadn't turned out too bad. Different how? Happier, she said. Calvin stopped eating. And are you happier, Callie thought, chewing slowly? I was really scared. Scared my grandma would die. Scared of being alone. But now, she shrugged. I'm still scared, but it's less. Why? Because you're here, and you promised you'd take care of me until my grandma comes back. Calvin felt a lump in his throat. He didn't trust his own voice, so he just nodded. Callie smiled and went back to eating. At night, she started asking him to read stories before bed. At first, Calvin didn't know how to do it. He had never read to a child before. But Callie had a few books they had brought from her house. Stories of princesses, of talking animals, of adventures. Calvin read with a somewhat hesitant voice at first, awkwardly. But Callie didn't mind. She would curl up under the covers, hugging her teddy bear, and listen attentively. You read differently than my grandma, she commented one night. Different how? She does different voices for the characters. You read normal. Calvin laughed. Sorry, I don't know how to do voices. It's okay, said Callie. I like the way you read. And every night before leaving her room she would say, Good night, Calvin, and he would reply, Good night, Callie. Small, simple. but it meant everything. During the week, and Callie started sharing more secrets, little things. How she was afraid of thunder. How she didn't like peas but ate them anyway because her grandma said it was important. How she wanted a dog one day, but knew they couldn't have one. Why not? Calvin asked one afternoon while she was drawing and he was pretending to work. Because dogs need space and food and a vet, and we don't have money for that. The natural way she said it made Calvin pause. 7 years old, and she already understood financial limitations. She had already learned not to ask. "One day you'll have a dog," he said. "You think so?" "I do. A big one. That likes to play." Callie smiled, her eyes shining. "I would name him Biscuit." "Biscuit? Yeah, because biscuits are good, and dogs are good too." Calvin laughed. And in that moment, he promised himself that one day she would have that dog. On Saturday, they went to visit Frances. She was sitting up in bed, without the oxygen mask. Her face was still pale, but better. More color. More life. Callie ran and hugged her grandmother tightly. "Grandma, you're better." "I am, my love." Frances ran her hand through her granddaughter's blonde hair. "Much better. Did the doctors say you can leave soon?" "In a few days, if everything keeps going well." Callie smiled, relieved. She sat on the edge of the bed and started to tell her everything. About school, about her homework, about the vanilla ice cream, about the drawings she had made. Frances listened to everything, smiling, but Calvin noticed that she wasn't just looking at her granddaughter. She was looking at him too, watching, analyzing. After a while, Callie went out into the hallway to get a drink of water from the fountain. Frances took the opportunity. "Sit here," she said, patting the chair next to the bed. Calvin sat. Frances was silent for a moment, just looking at him. Then she spoke, her voice still weak but filled with emotion. "She's smiling again." Calvin looked toward the door where Callie had left. "She's a strong girl." "She is." "But it wasn't just that," Frances continued. "You're doing her good." Calvin shook his head. "I'm just looking after her until you get back." "No, it's more than that." Frances took his hand, surprising him. "I know my granddaughter. I saw the weight she was carrying, the fear in her eyes every night. She would ask me if I was going to wake up the next day." Calvin felt something tighten in his chest. "But now she's different," Frances continued. "She laughs, tells stories. Her eyes, they shine again. You gave that back to her. Security. Trust. You showed her she's not alone." Calvin didn't know what to say. He looked at his own hands. "I just did what was right. And how many people do what's right?" Frances squeezed his hand. "How many people would put their whole life on hold for a child they don't know?" "She's not a stranger anymore." Frances smiled. "No, she's not. And you're not a stranger anymore either. Not to her and not to me." Callie came running back, jumping on the bed carefully. "Grandma, I brought a drawing for you." "You did? Let me see." Callie took the folded paper from her pocket. It was a drawing of 3 people, an older woman, a little girl, and a tall man, all holding hands. A huge yellow sun shining in the corner, flowers on the ground. Frances looked at the drawing, then at her granddaughter, then at Calvin, her eyes shining. "It's beautiful, my love." "It's us," Callie explained, pointing to each figure. "You, me, and Calvin. When you get back, we're going to go for a walk together." "We will," said Frances, her voice thick with emotion. She held the drawing carefully, looking at every detail. The 3 figures holding hands, smiling. Calvin looked at that drawing and felt something shift inside him, something deep. When they left the hospital, Callie held his hand on the way to the car. It was the first time she had done that without being scared or sad. She just held it, naturally, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. "Calvin? Thank you for taking care of me." He squeezed her small hand. "You don't have to thank me, Yes, I do. You didn't have to do any of this, but you did." Calvin stopped. He crouched in front of her right there, in the middle of the parking lot. "Callie, I want you to know something. I'm not doing this because I have to. I'm doing it because I want to. Because you're special. Okay?" She looked at him with those enormous blue eyes. Then she threw her arms around his neck and hugged him tight. Calvin hugged her back. And he realized that this little girl, with the old teddy bear and the sad eyes, had changed everything. She had given his life a purpose. She had made him care again. The phone rang on a Wednesday morning. Calvin was making toast for Callie when he saw the hospital's number on the screen. He answered quickly. "Hello? Mr. Rhodes, this is the nurse's station. Mrs. Frances has been discharged. Can you come pick her up today?" Calvin felt an immense relief wash over his chest. "I can... What time?" "Any time after 2 in the afternoon. I'll be there." He hung up and looked at Callie, who was chewing her toast slowly, her eyes fixed on him. She had stopped mid-bite, her whole body tense, waiting. "Was that the hospital?" she asked, her voice full of hope. "It was. Your grandma has been discharged. We're picking her up today." For a second, Callie just sat there, processing. Then she dropped the toast on her plate and jumped off the chair, shouting with joy. She ran around the room, her arms outstretched, laughing loudly. She ran to Calvin and hugged him around the waist. "She's coming back. She's coming back home." Calvin laughed too, picking her up and spinning her around. "She is. Today." Callie buried her face in his shoulder, and Calvin felt his shirt get wet. She was crying, but not from sadness, from pure relief. "Hey," he said softly. "It's all okay now." "I know," she said between sobs. "I was just so scared." Calvin held her tighter, and he understood. He understood the weight that this little child had been carrying all alone. "It's over. She's okay, and she's coming home." The day dragged on. Callie could barely pay attention in school. The teacher sent a note home saying she had spent the day staring out the window, smiling to herself. Calvin left the office early, picked her up at the gate, and they went straight to the hospital. Frances was sitting in a wheelchair in the lobby, a small bag on her lap. There was color in her face. Her eyes were brighter, her posture more upright. Still thin, still tired, but alive. "Grandma!" Callie let go of Calvin's hand and ran, throwing herself into her grandmother's arms. "My love, careful!" Frances laughed, hugging her granddaughter tightly. "Oh, how I've missed you. I missed you too. Every day. I know. I thought about you too. The whole time." Calvin stood nearby, watching, giving them space. Frances looked at him over Callie's head, her eyes shining with tears. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "For everything. You don't need to thank me. Let's go home." The nurse brought the discharge papers, explained the care instructions. Rest, medicine at the right times, no exertion. Calvin made a mental note of everything. They took Frances back to the little White House. Calvin drove slowly, being careful with every speed bump. In the back seat, Callie held her grandmother's hand and wouldn't stop talking. She recounted everything again, the classes, the homework, the vanilla ice cream, the drawings she had made, everything, as if she needed to make up for 2 weeks in a 20-minute drive. Frances listened to it all and smiling. From time to time she would look at Calvin in the rearview mirror, and there was something in her gaze, gratitude and recognition. When they arrived, Calvin helped Frances out of the car. She tried to stand up on her own, but her legs trembled. He held her arm firmly. "Easy does it. I can do it," she said, stubbornly. "I know you can, but you don't have to prove anything." Frances looked at him and smiled. She let him help her. They entered the house. Everything was exactly as they had left it. The small living room, the floral sofa, the coffee table with the crochet doily, but it lacked life. Frances sat on the sofa and sighed deeply, as if she were returning home after years away. She closed her eyes and just breathed. "I've missed this," she said softly. Callie sat next to her grandmother and rested her head on her shoulder. Frances slowly ran her hand through her granddaughter's blonde hair. Calvin stood by the door, feeling a bit lost. He didn't know if he should leave or stay, but before he could decide, Frances spoke without opening her eyes. "You're not leaving already, are you?" I thought you two might want to be alone." Frances opened her eyes and looked at him. "Stay a while, please." Calvin looked at Callie. She nodded. "Stay, Uncle Calvin." He felt that tightness in his chest again. Uncle Calvin so naturally, "Okay, I'll stay." He sat in the armchair. The three of them sat there talking. Francis asked about everything, what it was like taking care of Callie, if she had eaten properly, if she had been any trouble. "She was perfect," said Calvin, "more polite than many adults I know." Callie smiled. "Proud. I helped with everything. I washed dishes, made my bed, did my homework by myself." "She really did," Calvin confirmed. Francis looked at her granddaughter with so much pride that her eyes filled with tears. "You're a special girl, Callie." Then she looked at Calvin, and there was something else in her gaze now. "You two have formed a bond." It wasn't a question. "We have," Calvin agreed. "And now?" Francis asked. "Now that I'm back, are you going to disappear?" The question caught Calvin by surprise. "No," he said quickly. "If you two want me to, I'll keep coming." "We do," said Callie, jumping on the sofa. "You have to keep coming." Francis smiled. Then it settled. In the following days, Calvin created a new routine. In the morning, he would wake up early, stop by a market and buy groceries. Fresh bread, milk, fruit, meat, vegetables. He would take it all to Francis's house before going to work. At first, Francis tried to refuse. "Calvin, you don't have to do this. This must cost a fortune. We can manage." "I know you can manage," said Calvin, putting the things in the fridge. "But I want to help." "It's too much. It's too much. It's not. To me, it's nothing. And for you, it makes a difference, so let me do this, please." Francis looked at him for a long moment. She saw the sincerity in his eyes. "Okay," she said, her voice low. "Thank you." After work, he would stop by their house every day, without exception. Sometimes he stayed for dinner. Francis started cooking again, slowly, and her food was 1,000 times better than anything Calvin could make. He would eat and praise it, and Francis would smile, satisfied. Other times he just stopped by for a quick visit, just to see if everything was okay, if Francis had taken her medicine, if Callie had done her homework. And he started to help with whatever was needed. He fixed the gate that wouldn't close properly. He changed 3 burnt-out light bulbs. He painted the wall in Callie's room that was peeling. He bought yellow paint, her favorite color, and spent all Saturday painting while Callie stood in the doorway giving her input. "More to the left. No, now it's crooked. Ah, that looks nice." Calvin would laugh and follow her instructions. He fixed the dripping kitchen faucet. He unclogged the bathroom sink. He replaced the lock on the front door. Small things. Things the house had needed for a long time. "You don't have to do all this," Francis said one day, watching him on the kitchen floor, fixing the faucet. "I know. But I want to." "Why?" Calvin paused. He looked at her, then at the house around them, at Callie drawing at the living room table, at the care in every detail of that small place. "Because I feel at peace here." The words came out before he could think, but they were true. Francis was quiet. She didn't say anything, just smiled and went back to peeling potatoes. Calvin went back to fixing the faucet, and he realized it was true. In that simple little house, with its stained walls and old furniture, he felt more at home than in his own luxury apartment. There was life here. There was laughter. There was the smell of home-cooked food. There was meaning. The weeks went by. Francis grew stronger every day. She went back to cooking for real. She went back to taking care of the house. And she went back to making cakes. The smell of fresh cake started to fill the kitchen again. Carrot cake, chocolate cake, orange cake. Francis would make them, and Calvin would eat, praise them, and ask for the recipe he knew he would never be able to replicate. Callie started smiling even more. She ran around the house, played in the yard, made a mess. But a good mess. A happy child's mess. She sang while she drew. She laughed out loud when she played. She told silly jokes that made Calvin and Francis laugh anyway. And Calvin kept coming. Every day he became part of their routine, and they became part of his more than that. They became the best part of his days. He would get to the office and already be thinking about when he could leave. He counted the hours. Sometimes he would rush out of meetings, making up excuses. His colleagues commented. His assistant asked if everything was okay. Calvin would just smile and say yes, that everything was more than okay, and it was. One Sunday, 3 weeks after Francis's discharge, She made lunch. A real lunch. Roasted chicken with potatoes and vegetables, fluffy rice, fresh salad, farofa. The whole house smelled of home cooking. Calvin had brought a dessert from the bakery. A strawberry shortcake that cost a fortune, but was worth every penny when he saw Callie's eyes light up. The three of them sat at the small kitchen table. It was a tight fit. Calvin was too big, the table was too small, but somehow it worked. It was cozy. Frances served the plates carefully. Callie chattered non-stop, telling them about school, about her friend Sophie who had fallen at recess but hadn't cried, about the drawing the teacher had put up on the bulletin board. Calvin listened to it all, smiled, asked questions. He felt part of it in a way he had never felt before. It happened in the middle of lunch. "Uncle Calvin, can you pass me the salt?" Callie asked, naturally, without thinking. Silence fell. Not an uncomfortable silence, but a charged one. Calvin stopped with his fork in mid-air. He looked at her. Callie took the salt shaker that he passed automatically, without realizing the weight of what she had said. She salted her food and went back to eating, continuing her story. But Calvin felt it. He felt a warmth in his chest, something that rose up his throat and burned behind his eyes. He swallowed hard, took a sip of water, pretended everything was normal. Uncle Calvin. But Frances always saw everything. She looked at him across the table, saw the way he averted his gaze, saw the emotion he was trying to hide. And she smiled, a small, gentle smile, full of understanding. They finished eating. Callie, full of energy, ran out to the yard. She wanted to play before dessert, to enjoy the afternoon sun. Calvin helped Frances clear the plates. He took them to the sink. She started washing and he started drying side by side, in comfortable silence. "Did you hear her?" Frances asked suddenly, softly. "I heard," said Calvin, drying a plate. "And?" Calvin stopped. He looked at the plate in his hand. "I don't know what to think." "You were happy," Frances said. "It wasn't a question. I was," he admitted, because there was no point in denying it. Frances stopped washing the dishes. She dried her hands and turned completely to face him. "You're already a part of this house, Calvin, and a part of her heart, too." Calvin looked out the kitchen window, at Callie chasing a butterfly in the yard, her blonde hair shining in the sun, her laughter loud and free. "I didn't expect this," he said, his voice hoarse. "I didn't expect it to be like this." "No one ever does," said Frances. "But sometimes the best things are the ones we don't plan." "I had a life before," Calvin continued. "A routine. Meetings, business, money. Everything fit. Everything in its place." "And were you happy?" Calvin was quiet for a long moment. He thought of the empty apartment, the endless meetings, the lonely nights, the emptiness he carried every day. "No," he said, finally honest with himself. "I wasn't." "And now?" He looked at her, then at Callie through the window, then at the little house around him with its imperfect walls and old furniture, with the smell of cake and the sound of a child's laughter. "Now I am—" Frances placed a hand on his arm, a gentle touch. "Then stay. You don't have to live here. You don't have to change your whole life, but stay in her life, in our life, because you make a difference." Calvin felt his eyes sting. He blinked quickly. He didn't cry, but he almost did. "I want to stay," he said, his voice firm. "I want to be a part of this, and then stay. It's that simple." Callie came running back in, sweaty, her cheeks pink, her eyes shining. "Uncle Calvin, come see the butterfly I found. It's yellow." Calvin looked at Frances. She nodded, smiling. He went out and followed Callie into the yard. She pointed to the butterfly resting on a red rose, yellow with black spots, delicate. "It's pretty, isn't it?" "It is," Calvin agreed, crouching beside her. "Grandma says butterflies mean change," said Callie, "that when one appears, it's because something is going to change." Calvin looked at the butterfly, then at the girl beside him. "Your grandma's right." "Is something going to change?" "I think it already has," said Calvin gently. "What changed?" Calvin smiled. He ruffled her hair. "Everything, Callie." Everything changed. She didn't fully understand, but she smiled back and went back to watching the butterfly. Calvin stayed there, crouched in the yard of that small house, watching a 7-year-old girl marvel at a yellow butterfly. And he realized he had found what he had always been searching for without knowing it. A place to belong, a reason to wake up, a family, not of blood, but of choice. And choice was worth more. The butterfly opened its wings and flew away. Callie waved goodbye to it, waving, "Bye, butterfly, come back soon." Then she took Calvin's hand, naturally. "Can we have dessert now? I'm hungry again." Calvin laughed. "Let's go." They went inside together, hand in hand. Frances was in the kitchen cutting the cake, placing slices on small plates. She looked at them coming in together and smiled. "Come on. It's all ready." The three of them sat down again. They ate cake, they talked, they laughed. Callie licked the whipped cream off her finger. Frances scolded her lightly but was laughing. Calvin ate 2 slices and said it was the best cake he had ever tasted. And Calvin understood with every cell in his body that this was his place, here, at this table, with these people. As simple as that, and as perfect as that. It was a Friday afternoon when it happened. Calvin had stopped by their house after work, as he always did. He found Callie at the living room table, surrounded by colored pencils, papers scattered everywhere, her tongue sticking out in concentration. "What are you doing?" he asked, dropping his work briefcase on the sofa. "A drawing," she said without looking up. "But you can't see it yet. It's a surprise." "A surprise? For who?" "It's a secret." Calvin smiled. He let her work. He went to the kitchen where Frances was preparing dinner. The smell of roasted chicken filled the house. "She's been at it for an hour," said Frances, stirring the rice on the stove. "She didn't even want a snack. Said she had to finish something important." "Important how?" Frances shrugged, but there was a smile on her face. "You'll see." The three of them had dinner, as had become their custom. Callie ate quickly, rushed, her eyes shining with excitement. As soon as she finished, she jumped from her chair. "I'll be right back." She ran off to her room. Calvin and Frances exchanged glances. "She's up to something," he said. "She always is," Frances laughed. Callie came back holding a folded piece of paper against her chest. She stopped in front of Calvin, suddenly shy, her bare feet shifting on the floor. "I made something for you." Calvin felt something tighten in his chest. "You did?" She nodded. She held out the paper, still folded. "You can open it." Calvin took it carefully. He unfolded it slowly and paused. It was a drawing, made with colored pencils, with crooked but careful lines. 2 figures holding hands, a large one in a suit and tie, a small one with long yellow hair. Behind them, a huge yellow sun, colorful flowers on the ground, birds in the sky, and at the top in large, careful letters written in blue pencil, "You are my friend." Calvin just stared at the drawing. He couldn't speak. Something was caught in his throat. His eyes burned. "Do you like it?" Callie asked anxiously. "I tried to make you look really handsome. I drew the watch and everything. And I drew flowers because you said you like flowers." Calvin had never said he liked flowers, but somehow she had noticed. She had noticed the way he looked at the flower bed when he arrived, how he would pause to look at the red roses. His voice failed him. He cleared his throat. "I love it, Callie." "Really? It's not ugly." "That's perfect," he said. And it was true. It was the most beautiful drawing he had ever seen. "Can I keep it?" Her eyes lit up. "Of course. I made it for you." She threw her arms around his neck, hugging him tight. Calvin hugged her back, holding the drawing carefully so as not to crease it. "Thank you," he said, softly. "Really?" "You're welcome, Uncle Calvin." She let go and ran off again, probably to play in the yard before it got dark. Calvin stayed there, sitting, looking at the drawing. He ran his finger over the letters. "You are my friend." 4 simple words that carried tons of weight. Frances sat in the chair next to him. She was quiet for a moment, just watching. "She spent the whole afternoon on that," she said, gently. She erased and redrew it several times. She wanted it to be perfect. "It is," said Calvin, his voice hoarse. She doesn't call just anyone a friend, Francis continued. She's careful about that. Always has been. I think it's because she's lost so many people. She doesn't give her heart away easily. Calvin looked at her, and she gave it to me. It wasn't a question. It was a realization that left him both honored and terrified. She did, Francis confirmed, completely. They were silent for a moment. Outside, they could hear Callie singing softly as she played. "Can I ask you something?" Calvin said suddenly. "Of course. How did you end up here, in this house, in this life? You and Callie?" Francis sighed. She looked at her own hands, old hands marked by time and work. "It's a long story. I have time." She looked at him. She saw sincerity there, genuine curiosity, not pity, not judgment, just real interest. "I was a teacher for 30 years, she began, her voice soft but firm. "Elementary school. 6, 7-year-old kids. Literacy. It was my passion. Waking up every day and teaching children to read, to write, to discover the world through words." Calvin listened intently. "I loved it," Francis continued, a nostalgic smile on her face. "Every child who learned to put letters together, who managed to read their first word on their own. It was magical. Every year, for 30 years, I saw hundreds of children grow up." "Did you stop teaching?" "I did," she nodded. 7 years ago, when my daughter died." Calvin felt his chest tighten. "Leah, Callie's mom." "Yes." Francis looked out the window, at the last rays of sun. She was 23, too young, full of life. "And then," her voice broke, "then she got pregnant." Francis paused. She took a deep breath. Calvin waited, not rushing her. "The pregnancy was difficult from the start," she continued. "Complications, high blood pressure. The doctors warned there was a risk, but Leah wanted to have the baby. She wanted it so much. She said everything would be fine, and it wasn't." "No," Francis closed her eyes. "The delivery was complicated. A lot of blood. A lot of chaos. They managed to save the baby. Callie was born perfect, healthy, beautiful, but Leah, she didn't make it." Silence fell heavily. Calvin didn't know what to say. There were no words for that. "She died without getting to hold her daughter," said Francis, her voice breaking. "Without hearing her cry, without seeing the blue eyes that she got from her." Calvin saw the tears in Francis's eyes. He wanted to say something, but she continued. "When they placed Callie in my arms at the hospital, I looked at that tiny baby and thought, now it's me. It's just me. She has no one else. She just has her grandma. And the father." Francis gave a bitter smile. "The father, well, that's another story. Leah never wanted to talk much about him. She said they had a relationship, that it had been intense but brief, and that it hadn't worked out. He went his way, she went hers. When she found out she was pregnant, he was already gone." "Did he know?" "No." Francis shook her head. "Leah chose not to tell him. She said he wasn't ready, that it wouldn't be fair. So she decided to go it alone, and I supported her." Calvin absorbed that. He tried to imagine a single mother, pregnant, without the father around, and then dying in childbirth, leaving a child orphaned with her grandmother. "I was 57 when Callie was born," said Francis, "an age to start thinking about retirement. But instead, I came home with a newborn baby. Alone. And school." I tried to continue. Francis sighed. "For the first few months, I tried. I would leave Callie with a neighbor, go teach, and rush back. But it was too hard. I couldn't concentrate. I kept thinking about her all the time, and she was so tiny, so fragile. I was afraid of losing her too. So you quit?" "I did." Francis nodded. "I resigned at the end of the year. It was one of the hardest decisions of my life. But it was what I had to do. Callie needed me, and I needed her." "And how did you support yourselves?" "I had a small pension, very small. It was barely enough for anything." Francis looked around the house. "We had to save on everything, and even then it wasn't enough. So I started making cakes." "Cakes?" "Yeah," she smiled. "I always knew how. My mother taught me when I was a girl. Old family recipes, so I started selling them, to neighbors, to acquaintances, by order. Birthday cakes, party cakes, cakes for any occasion. It wasn't much money, but it helped. Calvin imagined a younger Francis, taking care of a baby and making cakes to sell. The exhaustion, the constant worry. "And you did that for how long?" "Until last year," said Francis. "Until my health started to fail. My body couldn't take it anymore. Standing for so long, carrying heavy things, the heat from the oven, I started having aches, fatigue. And then the pneumonia came. And Callie. Callie has always been an easy child," Francis smiled in with genuine pride. "Never gave any trouble, always helped where she could. And she's smart, very smart. When it was time for her to go to school, I was worried. I didn't have the money to pay for a private school, and the public ones here are complicated. And then something unexpected happened." Francis looked at him. "The school where I used to teach offered me a scholarship, a full one, for Callie to study there." Calvin's eyes widened. "They offered it?" "Yes," Francis nodded. "I never asked. I never said anything. But they knew my story. They knew I had lost my daughter, that I was raising my granddaughter alone. And one day the principal called me, said they had an opening, that Callie could study there for free. That was a beautiful gesture. It was." Francis had tears in her eyes again. "I never asked. I never expected it. But they knew our story, and they reached out. It was everything for us. A quality education, teachers who knew me, a safe place for Callie. It was the answer to a prayer." Calvin felt something tighten in his chest. He thought of everything Francis had been through, losing her daughter, raising her granddaughter alone, giving up her career, working until her body couldn't take it anymore, and still maintaining her dignity, keeping the house clean, keeping Callie happy and healthy. "You are an incredible woman," he said sincerely. Francis laughed, embarrassed. "I just did what had to be done. There was no other option. There's always another option. You chose to stay. You chose to care. You chose to love. That's worth everything." Francis looked at him, her eyes shining. "Thank you for saying that. It's true." They were silent for a moment, listening to Callie play outside, listening to life happen. "And now you've come into our lives," said Francis gently, "and changed everything again." "I didn't change anything." "You did," she insisted. "You brought security. You brought stability. You brought food to the table and repairs to the house. But more importantly than all of that," she pointed to the drawing Calvin was still holding, "you brought love. You cared, truly." Calvin looked at the drawing, at the crooked lines, at the careful letters. "You are my friend. She's special. She is. And she sees you the same way." Calvin folded the drawing carefully. He put it in his shirt pocket, close to his heart. "I'm going to keep this forever." "I know you will." Callie came running back inside, sweaty, happy. "Uncle Calvin, you're still here." "Still am," he smiled. "I thought you were done with me." "I'm never done with you," she said, simply, honestly. And in that moment, Calvin understood the weight of what Francis had said. Callie had given him her heart completely, without reservations. She trusted him, depended on him, loved him, and he loved her back. She was no longer a child he was helping out of pity or obligation. She was someone who was a part of him now, someone who mattered more than meetings, more than money, more than anything he had thought was important before. "Come play with me outside," Callie asked, pulling his hand. "It's getting dark." "Just a little longer, please." Calvin looked at Francis. She nodded, smiling. "Go on, I'll clean up here." He got up and let Callie pull him outside. They played in the yard until it was completely dark. Callie showed him the flowers, the little stones she had found, the ant carrying a leaf 3 times its size, and Calvin paid attention to everything. Because every single one of those moments mattered. When he left that night, late Dua, he put his hand on his shirt pocket. He felt the drawing there, folded, safe, "You are my friend," and he drove home smiling. Because for the first time in his life, he knew exactly where he belonged. And with whom. It was a Saturday afternoon when the question finally came out. Calvin was helping Francis organize the living room bookshelf. Callie had been playing there earlier and had messed up the books. He picked each one up, wiped off the dust, and put it back in its place. That's when his eyes landed on a photograph. It had always been there, since the first time he had entered that house, but he had never really paid attention to it. It was just another photo among many. But now, holding it in his hand, he looked a young woman, 20-something, light blonde hair, almost the same shade as Callie's, bright blue eyes, a wide smile. She was in a park, sitting on a bench, the sun hitting her face. There was something familiar about that face, something he couldn't place. But it bothered him. Like a word on the tip of his tongue. Who was Callie's mother? He asked, still looking at the photo. The silence that followed was heavy. Calvin looked up. Frances was standing in the middle of the room, a book in her hands, her face pale. She was looking at him with an expression he couldn't decipher. Fear, expectation, resignation. "Frances?" he called, gently. She took a deep breath. She placed the book on the shelf slowly, then she looked at him. "Leah," she said, her voice low. "My daughter. Her name was Leah." Calvin nodded. He looked at the photo again. She was beautiful. She was, Frances agreed, inside and out. She was quiet for a moment. Then, with slow steps, she crossed the room to him. She took the photo from his hands. She looked at her daughter with so much love and pain that Calvin felt his chest tighten. "She took this picture 2 months before she died," said Frances. "She was 5 months pregnant here. You can't tell because of the loose clothes, but she was, and so happy. Despite everything, she was happy." Calvin looked at the photo more closely. He tried to see signs of the pregnancy, but all he saw was the smile, that smile that seemed familiar. "Can I ask something?" he said, hesitantly. You said the father didn't know, that Leah chose not to tell him." "Yes." "Why?" Frances looked at him, then at the photo, then back at him, and Calvin saw the exact moment she decided to tell the truth. Because she knew he wasn't ready. How did she know? Because she knew him well, and she knew he had other plans, other dreams. He wanted to grow, build an empire, make a fortune. A child wasn't part of those plans. Calvin felt a strange feeling in his chest, a premonition, a fear. Frances. She met him at a coffee shop, Frances continued, her voice firm now, determined to finish what she had started. He was young, ambitious, determined. She was a dreamer, gentle, calm. They were opposites who attracted. They liked each other, a lot. But they fought too, a lot. Calvin's heart started to beat faster. He wanted to get ahead in life, to build something big, to work non-stop until he reached the top. She wanted peace, a simple life, children, a garden, time to breathe. "Frances," Calvin repeated, his voice coming out strange. "They broke up after 6 months. Frances looked at him now, straight in the eyes. He said he couldn't stay, that he had big plans, that she deserved someone who wanted the same thing she did. So he left. No. Calvin shook his head, but he couldn't stop listening. 2 weeks later, she found out she was pregnant. Frances continued. She thought about telling him, picked up the phone several times, but she always gave up, because she knew he wouldn't want it. That he would offer money, maybe, but he wouldn't stay, and she didn't want to raise a child like that. With a father out of obligation, Calvin felt his legs go weak. He sat on the edge of the sofa. His name. His voice failed him. What was his name? Frances didn't answer. She just looked at him, and Calvin saw the answer in her eyes. "No," he said again, but without conviction. Frances turned and took another photo from the shelf, one that was more hidden, behind the others. She held it out to him. Calvin took it with trembling hands. It was Leah again, but not alone this time. She was hugging a man, young, dark hair, a confident smile. He was wearing a suit, even in the park where the photo was taken, and he had a watch on his wrist, a watch that Calvin knew well, because it was his watch, or rather, it had been. The watch he had sold years ago when he needed money to invest in his company. his first luxury watch, bought to celebrate his first big deal. And there it was, on the wrist of a younger man, of a younger Calvin. The photo fell from his hands. "Leah," his voice came out hoarse, breaking. "We had a brief relationship." Francis nodded silently. "We liked each other," Calvin continued, the memories coming back in flashes. "But we fought a lot. I wanted to get ahead in life. I wanted to build something big. She wanted peace." "Yes." "We broke up." He looked at Francis, his eyes wide. "I broke up with her. I said I couldn't stay, that I had plans, that she deserved someone better, and I left. And you never heard from her again?" "Never." Calvin ran his hands over his face. I tried not to think about her. I tried to focus on work, to build the company. But sometimes I remembered her smile, the way she laughed, and I wondered if I had done the right thing." Francis sat next to him on the sofa. "She knew you weren't ready," she said, gently. "That's why she chose not to contact you. She didn't want to force you. She didn't want you to stay out of obligation." Calvin looked at her, then at his own feet, then at the photo lying on the floor. Leah smiling. A young Calvin smiling. And then he looked down the hallway, to the room where Callie was playing. He heard her laugh, her voice singing softly. "Callie." His voice came out in a whisper. "Callie is my daughter." It wasn't a question. It was a statement, a truth that fell on him like a ton of bricks. Francis didn't say anything. She just looked at him and nodded. Slowly, confirming, Calvin stood up. He stumbled a bit. He held onto the wall. I need some air. Calvin, I just need a moment." He left. Quickly, without looking back, he got in his car and drove. Aimlessly. He just drove. The tears came midway. He pulled over on an empty street and cried. He cried for Leah. For everything that could have been and wasn't. He cried for Callie, for the childhood she had without a father. He cried for himself, for 7 lost years. 7 years. His daughter was 7 years old, and he didn't know. He wasn't there when she was born. He wasn't there for her first steps, for her first words, for her first day of school, for anything. He had missed everything. The next few days were a blur. Calvin didn't go back to Francis's house. He didn't answer his calls. He didn't reply to her messages. He stayed in his apartment, alone, thinking about Leah, about the last conversation they had, about the way she had looked at him when he said he was leaving. There was sadness there, but also understanding, as if she already knew it would end like this. Thinking about Callie, about every moment they had shared, the dinners, the homework, the vanilla ice cream, the stories before bed, the drawing. "You are my friend." His daughter. His daughter had made a drawing for him, had called him a friend, had trusted him, loved him, and he didn't even know. And now he knew. What now? On the 3rd day, Francis called again. This time he answered, "Calvin." "Francis, are you okay?" No, he was honest. "I'm not. I understand." "Callie, has she asked about me?" There was a pause. Then Francis said gently, "Every day. She doesn't understand why you stopped coming. She thinks she did something wrong." Calvin closed his eyes. The pain was physical. "She didn't do anything wrong. I know, and you know, but she doesn't." "What do I do, Francis?" "You come back," she said simply. "You come back and you decide what you want. But decide soon, because she's hurting." Calvin hung up. He stared at the wall, at the drawing he had framed and placed on his bedside table. "You are my friend." On the 4th day he made his decision. He got up, took a shower, got dressed, and drove to Francis's house. He knocked on the door. Francis answered. She looked at him with a mixture of relief and concern. "She's in her room," she said. "I need to talk to you first." Francis nodded. They sat in the living room, the same place where it had all begun, where he had first seen Leah in the photo without knowing who she really was. Calvin took a deep breath. He looked at Francis, and he spoke. "I want to be a father." Francis was quiet, waiting. "For real," he continued, his voice firm now. "For her. For you two. I can't go back in time. I can't get back the 7 years I lost. But I can be here now. And I can be here from now on. If you'll let me, Calvin, I know I didn't plan this. I know I wasn't ready before, and maybe I'm still not completely ready now, but I want to try. I want to be the father she deserves, even if it's late. Even if I don't know exactly how to do it, I want to try. Frances had tears in her eyes. And you're going to tell her? I will, he nodded. When the time is right. When she's ready. But for now I just want to be here. For her. In the way she needs me. Frances reached out her hand and held his. She squeezed it tightly. She has already accepted you, she said, her voice thick with emotion. You saw it. She already loves you. All that's left is for you to let yourself love her back. Let yourself be a father. Calvin felt the tears in his own eyes. I already love her. I think I always have. Since the first day, I just didn't know why. Now you know. Now I know. Frances smiled. She wiped her eyes. She's going to be so happy you're back. Can I see her? Of course. Calvin stood up. He walked down the hallway to Callie's room. He knocked lightly on the door. Come in, came her small voice. He opened the door. Callie was sitting on the bed, hugging her old teddy bear. When she saw who it was, her eyes widened. She jumped off the bed and ran, throwing herself into his arms. Uncle Calvin, you're back. Calvin hugged her tightly. He closed his eyes. He felt her weight in his arms, the smell of baby shampoo in her hair, the warmth of her small body. His daughter. I'm back, he said, his voice hoarse. And I'm not leaving again. I promise. Do you really promise? I promise. Callie hugged him tighter. I missed you. I missed you too, he said. And it was true. The purest truth he had ever spoken. They stayed like that for a long moment, hugging father and daughter, even if she didn't know it yet, but one day she would. And when she did, Calvin would be there. Forever. 3 months after the revelation, Calvin parked his car in front of the small house and honked twice. Frances and Callie came out, curious. He had asked them to get ready without telling them why. He just said it was a surprise. Where are we going? Callie asked, getting in the car. You'll see, said Calvin, smiling. They drove for 20 minutes. They left their neighborhood, passed through downtown, and entered a quieter area. Trees lined the sidewalks, houses with gardens, kids playing in the street. Calvin stopped in front of a house. It wasn't huge. It wasn't a mansion, but it was beautiful, cozy. A single-story house painted white with blue details, a garden in the front with green grass and space for planting, a porch with rocking chairs, large windows. This is it, he said, turning off the engine. This is what? Asked Frances. The surprise. They got out of the car. Calvin took a key from his pocket and opened the gate. Then he opened the front door. You can go in. Callie went in first, running. She stopped in the middle of the empty living room, looking at everything with wide eyes. The living room was spacious, with light wood floors. Large windows filled the room with natural light. You could see the backyard through the glass door. It's so beautiful, said Callie, amazed. Frances entered more slowly, looking at everything carefully. Calvin, what is this? Our new house, he said, simply. Silence fell. Frances looked at him, confused. What do you mean? I bought it for us, for the 3 of us. You bought a house? I did. He nodded. It has 3 bedrooms. 1 for you, 1 for Callie, 1 for me, 2 bathrooms, and a big bright kitchen, perfect for making cakes. Frances brought her hand to her mouth, her eyes filled with tears. Calvin, you didn't have to. I know, but I wanted to, he said firmly. That house of yours is too small. It has leaks. Things are broken. And I want you to have more. Comfort. Security. A real home. And I want to live with you, he continued. For real. Not just visit. I want to wake up every day and see Callie. I want to have breakfast with you. I want to help with homework every night. I want to be part of the routine. Completely. Callie had stopped exploring. She was standing in the middle of the living room, listening. Then she ran to Calvin and hugged him around the waist. "We're going to live together. We are. If you want to." "I do," she shouted, jumping up and down. "I really do." Calvin looked at Frances. She was crying silently. "Frances?" "I don't know what to say." "Say yes." She let out a wet laugh. She wiped her eyes. "Yes, of course. Yes." Callie shouted again and ran off to explore the whole house. "Come on," said Calvin, holding out his hand to Frances. "Let me show you." He guided her through the house. He showed her the kitchen first, spacious, with white granite countertops, new cabinets, a large window over the sink. Natural light streamed in from all sides. "There's space for everything you need," he said. "A mixer, pans, pots, and look here." He opened a door, a pantry, to store ingredients, flour, sugar, everything. Frances ran her hand over the countertop. She imagined making cakes there. "It's perfect." He showed her her bedroom next, at the end of the hall, spacious, with a small closet and a private bathroom. "I thought of you when I saw this room," said Calvin. "It has the bathroom in here, more privacy, and look at the window. It faces the backyard." Frances looked out the window. She saw trees, space, greenery. "Calvin, this is too much. It's not. It's what you deserve." Then he showed her Callie's room, medium-sized, with a large window as well. The walls were white, waiting to be painted. "I thought Callie could choose the color in," he said, "and we can decorate it however she wants. Drawings on the wall, shelves for books, whatever she prefers. She's going to love it." His room was across the hall, simple. He didn't need much. They finished the tour in the backyard. It was large. A wide lawn, a few trees, a perfect space to play. And in the corner, an empty flower bed waiting. "I thought we could plant flowers here," said Calvin. "Roses, like the ones you had, and others too. Callie can choose. She can help plant them. It will be her garden." Frances was crying again. "You thought of everything." "I tried," he smiled. "I want this to be a real home. For you, for us." Callie came running up, all sweaty. "Uncle Calvin, my room is huge, and it has a closet." "Now you do," he laughed. "And we're going to fill it with new clothes. And can I paint it yellow?" "You can paint it any color you want." She jumped for joy. 2 weeks later, they moved. They didn't have much to bring from the old house. Some furniture, clothes, personal items. Calvin had bought new furniture for the house. Beds, a sofa, a dining table. But he let Frances choose everything. Colors, styles, whatever she thought was best. "It's our house," he said. "You decide." Frances chose everything with care. Nothing too expensive. Nothing exaggerated, but beautiful, cozy, like a home. Callie's room was painted a light yellow. She helped, of course. She held the paint roller, applied it to the wall with her tongue sticking out in concentration. She got her clothes completely dirty, painted herself more than the wall. There was paint in her hair, on her face, on her arms. But she laughed the whole time. "It's the most beautiful room in the world," she said. "It is," Calvin agreed, wiping a spot of paint from her cheek. They put up shelves for books, a desk for doing homework, decorations that she chose. It was hers, completely hers. The kitchen became Frances's kingdom. She spent the first day just organizing, putting everything in its right place, testing the oven, trying out the new pots and pans, opening and closing the cabinets. And then, on the third day in the new house, she started making cakes again. The smell filled the entire house. Chocolate cake. The first of many. Callie helped, of course. She cracked the eggs, spilling a little on the counter. She sifted the flour, creating a white cloud that hung in the air. She stirred the batter, licked the spoon. She made a mess of the whole kitchen, leaving flour on every surface. But Frances didn't mind. She just laughed in a way that Calvin hadn't seen in a long time. "Are you happy, Grandma?" Callie asked, with flour on her nose. "Very happy, my love." "Me too." He planted with Callie in the garden on a Saturday morning. They bought seedlings for roses, daisies, sunflowers. Callie chose each one at the store, taking her time, analyzing the colors, and together, kneeling in the dirt, they planted. She dug the little holes, he placed the seedlings. She threw dirt, he arranged it. She got her hands, face and dress dirty, but she never stopped smiling. They're going to grow, right, Uncle Calvin? They will, and we'll take care of them together. We'll water them every day. Watch them grow big and beautiful. Promise. I promise. The evenings became routine again. Dinner together, the three of them at the new kitchen table. Then homework in the living room. Calvin sitting next to Callie, helping with math, correcting her English, and every night before she went to sleep, he read her stories, in her yellow room, with her tucked under the covers, hugging her old teddy bear. One more story, she always asked. We've already read 3, just one more, the last one, and he always gave in. Because he knew he had years to make up for, years of stories he hadn't read. She still didn't know the whole truth. She still didn't know that he was her father. Calvin and Francis had decided to wait for the right moment, not to rush it, to let it happen naturally. But Calvin knew that she would know soon, and he was ready. On a Friday night, during dinner, Callie asked the question. They were eating the spaghetti Francis had made, talking about their day. Callie told them about school, about her friend Sophie, about the math test she had done well on. Then she paused. She looked around, at the cozy space, at the 3 of them sitting together, and she asked, her voice coming out low. Is this our house? Calvin put his fork down. He looked at her. It is, for real. We never have to leave. Never, he said firmly. This house is ours, forever. But what if... She hesitated. What if the money runs out? What if you can't pay for it anymore? Calvin felt his chest tighten. Callie still carried that fear of loss, fear of not having enough. He reached out his hand and held hers. Small, warm. It won't run out, he said, gently but firmly. And I will secure your future. Food, shelter, love. Everything you need. You will never have to worry about any of that again, I promise. And I don't break my promises. Callie looked at him with those enormous blue eyes. Then she nodded, seeming to finally believe him. Thank you, Uncle Calvin. You're welcome, Callie. Frances had tears in her eyes, but she didn't say anything. She just smiled and went back to eating. One late afternoon, 3 weeks after they moved in, they were in the garden. Frances had made an apple cake. The sweet cinnamon scent drifted out of the open kitchen window. She brought slices on floral plates, along with iced juice in a glass pitcher. Callie was running around the lawn, barefoot, her blonde hair flying freely, chasing a yellow butterfly that danced in the air, laughing loudly, free, completely happy, no worries, no fears. Calvin was sitting in one of the garden chairs, just watching her play, watching Frances serve the cake with love, watching the sun slowly set, painting everything in orange and pink, and he felt complete. Uncle Calvin. Callie ran up to him, out of breath. Come play with me. I'm tired, he smiled. Come here. She climbed onto his lap without hesitation. Small light, smelling of grass and sun. She rested her head on his shoulder, her body relaxing. I like living here. Me too. Are we going to stay forever? Forever, he promised, kissing the top of her head. She sighed, satisfied. She was quiet for a moment, her eyes closed, sleepiness creeping in. Then, as naturally as breathing, as softly as the wind, she said, Good night, Daddy. The world stopped. Calvin froze, his heart raced. He looked at her, but Callie had closed her eyes, tired. She didn't even realize the weight of what she had said, or maybe she did, but to her it was natural, it was right. He looked at Frances. She was standing there, the cake platter in her hand, her eyes wide, but smiling with her whole face, with her whole soul. Calvin looked back at Callie, at his daughter, in his arms, calling him Dad. He closed his eyes. He felt the tears come. He didn't hold them back. He let them fall. He let all the emotion out. Good night, my daughter, he whispered, his voice thick, breaking, and he hugged her tighter, as if he could absorb her, as if he could make up for all the lost years in that one embrace. Frances approached slowly. She sat in the chair beside him. She placed her hand on Calvin's shoulder, and they stayed like that, the three of them, in silence, watching the sun set, watching the sky change color, watching the day end. A family. Days later, Calvin framed a photo. He had asked a neighbor to take it the week before, in the garden. Calvin with Callie on his shoulders, she holding onto his hair so she wouldn't fall, laughing with her mouth wide open. Frances beside them, smiling, holding a platter with a freshly baked cake, still warm. The three of them together, happy, complete. He put the photo in a beautiful frame. Light wood, simple but elegant. And underneath, on a small metal plate, he had 2 words engraved. Our family. He placed it on the living room bookshelf, in a place of honor, where everyone would see it when they entered, and every time he walked past, he would stop to look. At this family he hadn't planned, that he hadn't expected, but that he had found anyway. A card offered by chance, a sad girl on a sidewalk, a simple gesture that changed everything, a heart that learned to stay, a family formed not by blood, but by choice and love. Always love. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.